This is a dense thicket. This is different than the rest of the battlefield, filled with briars, brambles, thorns, underbrush, any size tree you can think of. It's out here in this dense thicket. They give the hornet's nest its name. They talk about the round flying through the air, buzzing like angry hornets. It's Gibson's brigade that gives it its name. And remember, they're trying to stay inside this dense thicket. And then their right flank over there, inside the dense thicket. Not the open field, but their left to their right flank of Colonel Randall Lee Gibson's brigade. That is the hornet's nest. That will line up in this area, they've got artillery right behind them shooting over their heads. Now, that leads me to a point. The type of artillery that will be placed back there, they're 10 and 20 pound Parrott rifles. Highly accurate artillery. So much that the 10 pounders, their maximum effective range is 1,850 yards. The 20 pounders over 1,900 yards. So basically, just so we understand, because we can't see through there and see where they are and see across the field. From where they are, through the trees, over our heads, across that field, that's less than half their maximum effective range. All that being said, it's too easy for that artillery to hit a target across this open field. So, you don't want to be trying to come across, or you don't want to try to come out of the wood line and cross this field, because the amount of Union artillery that's going to be back there, there are 12 of them back there. There's going to be plenty of Union infantry here. As a matter of fact, the troops that will end up lining up on this line, the Union troops are led by General W.H.L. Wallace. His headquarters was right behind Tour Stop 1. You saw the big tall Iowa monument. Then there was a tall stack of cannonballs behind it. That's where General Wallace's headquarters was. And just so you know, there were two General Wallaces here. Lew Wallace, to me, he's the other Wallace. And then there's W.H.L. Wallace. The only reason I say this is because William Wallace is here on the first day of the fight. His troops are involved right here during the first day of the fight. His three brigades are MacArthur, Sweeney, and Tuttle. You saw those three stacks of cannonballs on the way into the park. That's his three brigade headquarters under his division command. And he's got several regiments in each of those brigades. So it goes division, brigade, regiments. Now, MacArthur, Sweeney, and Tuttle's brigades, they will start heading the same direction, roughly the same direction you drove from the visitor center, at least from that main entrance road you saw. They all head this direction. MacArthur's brigade will be sent to the far Union left flank on the other side of the peach orchard. If you meet me over there at 3 o'clock, and I promise that talk only lasts 30 minutes, but if you meet me over there, this one lasts 40 years or so. But if you meet me over there at Tour Stop 16 at 3 o'clock, I will point out where MacArthur's brigade was sent. You saw them in the film. Some of those guys, if you saw the films, the guys with the funny looking berets on, the Scottish Tams, that's MacArthur's guys. They're over on the other side. But he's still got Sweeney and Tuttle's men here. They'll line up across the road. There's the Illinois monument right there. There's two other Illinois regiments, and then Iowa boys all the way up the way. Sweeney and Tuttle's men, he can't even fit all of them in on this line. Some of them will stay back and reserve near those artillery pieces. Some aren't even used until the very end of this part of the fight, because he's got so many. Now, they're not going to be out here in the open. This is another myth I have to bust. It makes a lot of people mad, especially people that have wanted to come see this feature for a long time. Our sunken road here was not sunken, especially not sunken like Bloody Lane at Antietam. Makes a lot of people mad, but the truth is a whole lot better than some fabricated or made up or whatever stuff. It did have deep wagon ruts in it, but the guys were skinny back then, but not that skinny. Plus, they're gonna get down in the prone. They're gonna fight on their stomachs. They reload on their backs, roll back onto their stomachs to fire. They're not going to do that out in the open right here. They can't use those wagon ruts. They're running the wrong direction for them to be fighting in the prone. Plus, it's nasty and muddy. Plus, it slopes off behind the road. And it says that in all of their accounts, they talk about how they got behind the road where the terrain slopes off, and they got down and laid down and fought in the prone behind the road. So whether this was sunken or not didn't even matter to them, because they had something even better because the terrain slopes off more behind the road. Plus, they're not going to use this fence. They know they can't use this fence. Besides the obvious gaps in this fence, which I can usually ask a 5-year-old, and they'll point it out too. But we've got these gaps in the fence that are obvious. That's not going to help them. Also, the any of the ordnance manuals at the time, I always quote 1862 ordnance manual, it states that it takes 10.5 inches of white pine to stop a smoothbore musket round from 200 yards. So that's only going to add splinters to the round that's about to thwack into their body. They're smart. They're not stupid. Contrary to popular belief, infantrymen are not stupid. We're crazy as all get out, but we're not stupid. We're not going to use this fence because it's only going to add to the round. We're not going to get out in the open because we're smarter than that. We're going to get back there, and that's exactly what those infantrymen did, and it's all in all of their accounts. Now, we'll give you. There are accounts that say it's an old, washed-out wagon road. Exactly. It's washed out where Briar Creek crosses it, and on the other side of the ridge, it's washed out again where Briar Creek crosses it again. That's where this is an old, washed-out wagon road. I'm not taking anything away from the original story. I'm telling you the original story, rather than allowing all these things to just keep going and going and going, so that people will, oh, come, I want to come see the sunken road. Well, yeah, then go to Antietam. But if you want to come see a pretty heavy, amazing fight that goes on, this is where you want to be right here. And I'm not saying anything about Antietam. That's a whole other battle. What I'm talking about is as far as the sunken road being sunken, it's not like that. It slopes off more behind it. Now that I've done all that, crushed the dream, sorry, but the truth is better. Now, this Union troops, like I said, they're going to line up back here. Now, the thing about Wallace, and I always like to tell this, it's kind of romantic type stuff, he tells his wife not to come down here from Ottawa, Illinois. He tells her to stay at home. She comes anyway. He thinks she's still at home in Ottawa. She arrives sometime during the battle on the first day. She arrives into the area and actually shows up at Pittsburgh Landing during the fight. Wallace still thinks she's at home in Ottawa, Illinois. All right, we're going to walk this direction, or I'm going to keep wearing down this spot right here. But we're going to walk this way. We'll try to stay close. We're going to head all the way up to the ridge up there. And we've gotten to the point, it's getting close to about 10:30. Wallace's boys are right back here. Good place to see how the terrain slopes off. That's where they're going to place themselves. Now, at 10:30, across this field, still in an open growth, or old growth, open type wood line, straight across the field, it's the same as like I was talking back here. There's going to be a Confederate brigade, Shaver's Confederate Brigade's doing a wheeling maneuver so that their brigade front can be fronted, or at least so they can have a good shot against another Union brigade that has not yet fallen back to Wallace's line. They're also in the woods across the field. So when Shaver's brigade is doing their wheeling maneuver, their right flank will stick out of the wood line across the field around 10:30 a.m. Right when that happens, Wallace's boys right here ready to get into the fight and do their part. They fire into the right flank of Shaver's brigade. At that point, Shaver's brigade will head back into the wood line quickly because they did not know what just hit them. They were not expecting this, and this changes things. Obviously, Shaver's has been hit, but now the Confederates know where the new line's been established, because that's how this battle's been fought from the very beginning at 4:55 a.m. You've got Wallace's Prentice's men out on patrol. Then they'll have to call for reinforcements, which will come up. They'll create a new line and fight there. Then they'll end up falling back, creating a new line, fighting, and then falling back again. That's how it's been going from the beginning of the battle. The thing is, what's the difference between Wallace's troops and the other divisions that have already been fighting? Wallace brings his troops forward into battle, creates a stable line for those other divisions to fall back to. So now that at that point, the other Union brigade will end up falling back to Wallace's right flank. Sherman and McClernand's division will fall to his right flank. To his left flank, General Prentice will fall back. Now, like I said, Prentice, fighting since 4:55 a.m., his men have. He's been losing guys from the very beginning of the battle. Starts the battle out with 5,403 troops ready for battle. By the time he pulls back to Wallace's left flank, all he can gather back together with him is about 500 men. Now, there's other men from his division fighting in other parts of the battlefield, but what he's got right with his command is around 500. That adds to what Wallace still has left, around 5,400 or so, not including those men back in reserve. So what he's got on his front line is over 5,000. Prentiss has over, well, he's got more than the 500 I was talking about because he gets reinforced, so over 1,000. They've got well over 6,000 just with Prentiss and Wallace's divisions here. Got those 12 parrot rifles straight through the trees. We're closer to them than when we were when we started. Then he's got more artillery up here, Munch's 1st Minnesota battery. 2 guns on this side of the road, 2 guns on the other. So this first attack that they'll send, now that they know where the new line is at 11 o'clock. This is a dense thicket. This is different than the rest of the battlefield, filled with briars, brambles, thorns, underbrush, any size tree you can think of. It's out here in this dense thicket. At 11 o'clock, Stevens' brigade with 875 men. 875 men armed with flintlocks and conversion muskets. So those conversion muskets and the older version of those, the flintlocks. Pushing through here. 875 men against well over 6,000. Plenty of artillery, and what Stevens does not have is artillery. So no Confederate artillery is coming through here. 875 men is not going to do a lot, but they're fighting through this thicket just to get through or to the fight. They get caught up on briars and thorns. They get within 100 paces, they're pinned down, not taking anything away from their attempts, but it's just too easy to push back that first attack that came at 11 o'clock, and they're going to fall back. The next one, not so smart of an attack. Now just so you know anything about General Braxton Bragg, he's the guy sending these attacks forward. This next attack, I do not consider this an attack through the Hornet's Nest because it's not. Plus, the Hornet's Nest didn't get its name till later, but the guys who give the Hornet's Nest its name don't start charging until 12. So, 11:30. On the other side of the field, through the wood line, Hindman and Stewart's brigades. Yeah, Hindman and Stewart's brigades. They come out of the wood line. Immediately under attack of these parrot rifles, just like we talked about earlier. They're under fire, but basically the infantry that's along this line is about 1 for 1. One infantryman against one infantryman is trying to charge across this field. They come out of the wood line immediately under attack. Infantry unloads on them. They don't make it to this fence. That newspaper etching that was back on that wayside exhibit back there was done by a guy who was nowhere near this battlefield, was not even in this state. So that's a horrible thing to be looking at. Now, he gets the split rail fence right. That's what I'll give him. But they were all over the south. Anyway. So they get close. They don't get to the fence. Our old 1956 film we used to show until our 150th a few years ago, the longest running film in the Park Service. It showed guys crossing this fence. That didn't happen. So during the 135th anniversary reenactment, guys were crossing the fence at the reenactment because they were going by an old film. But you don't have these guys making this fence because the heavy fire. Plus, you also have Munch's artillery up here, wheeling their artillery at an angle, shooting enfilade fire at an angle into this attack. It takes out more men than it would in a straight shot. Plus, you got all that artillery back there. I won't even mention anything for a minute. Now, they're not going to make it here, and not taking anything away from their attempts. Even though it was 3,100 men, they have to fall back. Then, 12 o'clock. Now, these are our real charges into the Hornet's Nest as far as it goes, because Colonel Randall Lee Gibson's brigade will lead 2,350 men from the south of here, start pushing through these briars and thorns, and they're going to make a series of attacks between 12 and 2 o'clock. We're about to move to one more location, and I'll start talking about their attempts, and I'll talk a little bit about Prentiss Division. Before we do, I got to let you know, people do speed on this road, so I got to warn you about that, so we have to be careful. And plus, when we cross the road, look back to your left, you'll see artillery back there. Unfortunately, it's not parrot rifles that are in that position, but that's where they were during the time of the battle. So let's head on this direction. We'll get into the good part of the Hornet's Nest talk. Gibson's brigade attacks. They get within, well, they get a little around the area where you see that plaque right there. That's not for their attacks, but that's close to where they get. What they come forward to, the end of Wallace's line right here, the 8th Iowa, that's the last regiment in Wallace's line. It's one of the very few monuments that's not where it needs to be, because when you're standing at a monument, we're supposed to be in the center of whatever unit it's talking about. It should be over here a little bit, but this gravel road's been here for a long time. Then we got Captain Andrew Hickenlooper's 5th Ohio Artillery over here. He's got 4 guns. Munch had those 4 guns, and don't forget about those 12 pair rifles back there. Now, these blue plaques down here, this is the remnants of Prentiss Division. That's why these plaques are so close together, because the first plaque is for the 12th Michigan. They had around 50 men left, armed with the Austrian rifle, a 54 caliber rifle. The Austrian rifles is one of the top 3 weapons used by either side at this battle. It is the Austrian rifle, the other 2, those conversion muskets, and then the Enfield rifled musket. So, how you know that? All right, but the 12th Michigan with those 50 men left, armed with those 54 caliber Austrian rifles, although they could have been in another caliber. I won't get into that. The next plaque, the second one down, is for the 18th Missouri. The 18th Missouri had about 100 men left, armed with those conversion muskets, 69 calibers. The third one down, the 18th Wisconsin, a bunch of German immigrants, about 200 of them left in the 18th Wisconsin, armed, oddly enough, armed with a Belgian musket. The Belgian musket came in a 69, 70, 71, or 72 caliber. I've seen theirs listed as 70 and 71 caliber. My phrase for this battle is ammunition resupply nightmare, and that is all across the board on this battle. Both sides, any spot on this battlefield, they are an ammunition resupply problem. It creates problems for both sides during this battle as well. Now, there's a 4th plaque a little bit further down for the 23rd Missouri. They were camped at Pittsburgh Landing the day before this battle. On the morning of the 6th, when the battle starts, they're planning on heading down the road that we just crossed, heading down to Prentiss's camps. They thought, well, the battle's going on, we'll get our ammunition in our camps or in Prentiss headquarters area. They're wrong, because Prentiss has already fallen back to here. His camps are overrun. As a matter of fact, the overall Confederate commander, Albert Sidney Johnston, is in those camps at that time. So they marched a mile and a half or so back to Pittsburgh Landing, get their 54 caliber ammunition for their Austrian rifles. Hopefully they grab some for the 12th Michigan, and they head back here a mile and a half and get in line. So now Prentiss has over 1,000 men at this point. Now, that bridge down there, that's where Briar Creek crosses this road again. A little bit further down and into the dense thicket is the 31st and 44th Indiana Infantry Regiments. They are in the dense thicket, firing at an angle into the right flank of anybody attacking through here. Now, all those men that were in the open area, with nobody at their front, so the 7th, the 2nd Iowa, and those 3 Illinois regiments, they will wheel out into the open field and shoot into the side of these attacks, into the side of the dense thicket, which leads me to a point. Now, these men charging through the dense thicket, they're getting caught on these briars and thorns. They're having to go around them. So we don't have a line moving forward. We don't have a snaky line moving forward through here. We have chunks of these brigade moving through this area when they're pushing in up in our location here. What happens, because they're trying to get back into the dense thicket, because they'll accidentally extend out, when they come back in, they'll overlap and shoot into the backs of their own men. But the thing about Gibson's brigade I like to tell a little bit further than just that is this brigade is a special one, because there's a lot of nationalities in this brigade, and some guy complaining about how ungodly these men were. That's how I know about the nationalities, because he's talking about how they smoked, drank, cursed, gambled, even on Sundays. But then he goes into their nationalities. I paraphrase these nationalities for obvious reasons, but except for the last nationality, I don't paraphrase it. But he goes through Italians, Frenchmen, Creoles, several other things. I can't even remember them all. Then he says African Americans, and then the last one he says, and even the Irish. It's funny, it's hilarious, but and it is. But he says it like that, and even the Irish, because they're square-jawed Catholics according to those people back then. But anyway, but that kind of gives a perspective on who's charging through here. Are we all here? We're all here. Woo! All right.
So, we've gotten up to those first two engagements, if you will, with Stevens Brigade charging right through here on that side of the road. Some on this probably, maybe. But they push right through there at that line. You get pushed back over in the open field. Still not an attack on the Hornet's nest necessary. But at 12, Colonel Randall Lee Gibson, Yale graduate. He actually knows one of Johnson's sons, and Johnson says something to him before they step out and tells him to take care of himself and things along those lines. Now, in Gibson's brigade, there's a regiment, the 1st Arkansas. They are veterans of 1st Manassas, or whatever you want to call it. And they come back out here to the Western Theater. Still not technically their area because they're from Arkansas, so it's Trans-Mississippi. But either way, they're a lot closer to home. But the 1st Arkansas. The other 3 regiments are Louisiana regiments. The 4th, 13th, and 19th Louisiana. Now, I like to talk about the commander of the 4th Louisiana. I think he's right up there, maybe, possibly, probably my favorite Confederate officer to talk about in this battle because of the way he serves his men. That's important to me personally. Definitely, yes. That's amazing. Now, Colonel Henry Watkins Allen, the commander of the 4th Louisiana, he moves around a good bit throughout his life. He even tries to go overseas. He does some touring in Europe and such, comes back when the war starts. He's in Louisiana. Now, he raises up a company, if you will, of men, and those men join up to serve with him in particular because they want to serve with this Henry Watkins Allen guy that they've already known. They know who he is. Most of them are some of them. And so they want to serve with him. Now, ends up being the regimental commander of the 4th Louisiana. And when they find themselves a little bit further south of here in Davis-Wheatfield, now, even from where we are right now, we can't see Davis-Wheatfield, and it's really just right through there. Now, so, at the time of the battle, remember, it's more dense at that time than it is now. So if we can't even see it now, do we think that they'd be able to see it then? Not at all. Those briars and thorns and such. Now, so they're back there, all of Gibson's brigade. Now the guy back here is General Braxton Bragg. Slowly for Bragg, he's hell on retreat. I'll be nice. So, kinda. So, Bragg's back here, and he orders his charge forward. And I'm sure it's really difficult for these Confederate generals trying to do things on this battlefield. I'm sure it is. I understand that it's difficult. But you'll see why I keep saying this. And this is one of the reasons I wish I'd been able to read Volume 10 as a kid, because I would have read an awesome argument between Bragg and all of the of Gibson's brigade, it seems. Now, we'll get into this. So these charges at noon, they start with 2,350 men approximately. As far as I can tell, at least the 4th Louisiana is armed with infields. The rest of those regiments, I'm still having some problems nailing down exactly what they're armed with. But either way, it doesn't, at this particular part of the battlefield, what they're carrying is not as significant as, say, over in the peach orchard and other parts of this entire battlefield. Now, it's still super important. It really is, because a lot of them are rifled weapons. Now, what's going to happen? They start pushing through this dense thicket. It's so visible now. I can see so far in this dense thicket here. But at the time of battle, not just the vegetation, but also black powder smoke. And it just didn't lift out of here at the time for some reason. And it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. So, when they push through, they talk about fighting through these briars and thorns. Those who have blanket rolls on, those get caught in the thorns. And they talk about weaseling out of those blanket rolls. Now, I've done Civil War stuff forever, 20-something years, whatever. and I've worn blanket rolls. I've even gotten caught in briars and thorns, and it's really funny. Seeing, especially me, because I get real animated and I'm stuck in thorns. Like a cartoon character apparently. But you get stuck or whatever. If you're trying, reason I'm telling you that is you have your canteen strapped on top of your blanket roll so you can drink out of your canteen. Otherwise, you're really looking funny trying to take a drink of water. So that's strapped on top. So if you take your blanket roll off before you take your canteen off, well, now you're in a little bind within yourself, much less than the briars and thorns. Now you're knocking your hat off, your canteen's off, and your blanket roll's off. And they talk about how all sorts of debris, meaning equipment, is hanging in this dense thicket. But they also say, the Union soldiers say, that the dead men were hanging like marionettes, like puppets. It was so dense that 100 or so pounds person body at dead weight doesn't fall all the way to the ground. It's that dense. And so that's what they're seeing. So Gibson's 2,350 approximately. They start pushing through here. They're losing men, hats everywhere, canteens, blanket rolls, and dead men. And they're pushing forward. They get very close to the Union line. They hit the ground because infantrymen aren't stupid. You've got somebody to get back home to. Yes, that guy, and the rest of my brothers. But, man, that wife back home waiting on you, that sweetheart, whoever, your kids, your parents, somebody, as I said this morning, the baby on the way that you still haven't met yet. You have somebody to get back home to. You take care of yourself as well as the men, because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of them, and you sure as heck aren't getting back home. So these guys push it forward, they hit the ground. They're fighting in the road. Now all of that infantry, all of that artillery up there, right on line, just unleashes. We already talked about canister and double canister, and that's exactly what that other artillery battery, Captain Andrew Hickenlooper's 5th Ohio Artillery, does. Canister, double canister, sprays and spreads, takes out huge chunks of these lines. And these guys are down in the prone. They're firing with everything they've got. The problem is, the more you fire a black powder weapon, it starts taking up, especially with the rifled weapon like the 4th Louisiana had, and now they're trying to ram around all the way down and it's starting to stick. Well, they end up falling back to Davis Wheatfield. And some of the guys didn't want to take a chance in getting back up and falling back because they're probably going to get hit. I might get hit. So some of them stay on the ground the entire time, are crawling around looking for more ammunition. Hopefully it goes to their weapon, or they better find the weapon that goes with the cartridge box they just found, but they continue to fire. The Union troops say we did not know when one charge started and one charge for the next one started. When does it happen? They don't know, because there's so many guys continuing to fire, and then there's all these bodies and debris hanging throughout the dense thicket up in the front. Now, when they get back, Gibson asks for artillery support. Bragg tells him to charge again. Now they start pushing forward. They get up on line. The same story, except Hickenlooper had sent 2 artillery pieces a little bit further forward, as he says to the military crest, where the terrain drops off slightly. They get up there. Well, guess what he didn't have? Infantrymen standing right next to the artillery piece. That might have helped, because those 2 pieces get captured. But men from the 8th Iowa, one of Wallace's, the end of Wallace's infantrymen, men from the 8th Iowa under Colonel Geddes, he says 2 companies leapt up from their recumbent position. There's evidence they're fighting in the prone. They're on the ground, they're recumbent. Anyway, so they jump up, they rush forward. Now, bayonets, are they on? Do they have time to put their bayonets on? Well, let me tell you this. Flip your weapon upside down. Use the butt of your musket as a club. And they do. They start cracking skulls and jaws and whatever else they can crack. And they get those 2 pieces back for Hickenlooper. Now you're out of trouble, buddy. Good job. All right. Thanks to the infantry. All right. I have to do that. I love the artillery. Anyway. They don't have any. Confederates don't have artillery support. How can you love what you don't have? So they fall back again after that second charge. Now they fall back. Now when you get back there, please, artillery support. No, charge forward. So they charge forward. Now Colonel Henry Watkins Allen, the commander of the 4th Louisiana. He's running up and down the lines of his men, and all of a sudden, shot through his face, through his cheeks, a hole through his face. He becomes covered in blood. But he doesn't leave his men. He stays with the men who joined to fight with him. He will still fight with these men, shot through the face. And he's running up and down the lines, shot through the face, probably a lot of missing teeth, screaming and yelling. Now this one young private said, I was petrified, scared to death, just wanted to be home with my mother. And my imagination has this kid just zoning out, or zoning in, whichever direction. But maybe he's not here for a second in his head. And maybe he's reaching out for his mother. And then all of a sudden, shot to the face, Colonel Allen, screaming and yelling, "Fire your weapon!" That kid said, all right then, I got the courage to roll over and continue firing until we fell back again. Now they're falling back again. Now Allen gets to the back. He's looking around for an ammunition chest, or an ammunition wagon. He finds one. He finds a box of artillery ammo, breaks it open. See, those rounds are packed in raw cotton. He gets that raw cotton, stuffs it in his cheeks, the holes of his cheeks. Gets a cotton cloth to wrap it around his head. Then he goes to Bragg himself. Sir, we need artillery support. We need to flank them. Allen, and I had a sergeant major that says if you're going to complain, come with two things to fix this problem. Have two solutions. That's pretty good. Allen says we need artillery support. We need to hit them from the flanks. Something else. He's begging for something else. Bragg says, Colonel Allen, I want no faltering now. You serve your regiment as they have served you. What? That has absolutely nothing to do with requesting for artillery support whatsoever. But Bragg, Allen knows not to talk back to this general. Colonel Allen knows not to talk back to General Bragg. He could be put under arrest right on the field, and then what would happen to his boys? He doesn't know. He wouldn't be with them. But he didn't talk back. He turns around, follows that pride, and a lot of blood, and probably some teeth marks. And then he heads back towards his boys. Now, an officer, staff officer, was told, go forward, get the colors of the 4th Louisiana, take them forward yourself, and do not let them fall back again. No offense, if anybody here was an officer, don't take this. Don't you touch my flag. I was enlisted men carry that flag. They earned the right to carry that flag. Now this is about to be one of those out of my cold dead hands type situations. Because that officer goes up to the color sergeant of the 4th Louisiana. There's a tug of war situation going on. He's not going to let it go. Out of my cold dead hands. I dare you, sir. All of a sudden he lets go because he's hit by a spent round. He falls dead. That officer standing there with the flag. Allen sees this. Bandaged up, bloody, stomps up to this officer, takes the colors away and says, if any officer's going to take this banner forward, it's going to be me. Whether he could understand what Allen was saying, it doesn't matter because he knows what he needs to do, which is let go of that flag and get the heck out of here. And he does. And Allen stands there with the flag, and he says this in French, but he says some choice words to his men first. In French. Even. But then he's holding the banner. Here, boys! Is as good a place as any on this battlefield to meet death! Because he knows what they've charged into 3 times already. And he knows what they have to do. He knows that they're outnumbered. I'm sure they have less than 2,000 men at this point. And they're going against a very superior force. Now before he handed those colors off, he gets them all riled up. But now that they're riled up, he hands the colors off to the guy that earned the right to carry that flag next, or someone that says, I'll do it, sir. It's those men. Whew. No weapon in their hand, carrying a banner forward. Just that guy that everybody wants to shoot down. Man, that's crazy. Now,
Fourth time.
now they come forward again. They get up to their buddies who've been on the ground in the prone, firing the entire time. They get up there. They're firing and firing and firing everything they have. The weapons are so fouled up, they can't ram any rounds down. Yeah, in between each charge right here, Briar cricket snakes around. It's so swollen it looks like a lake. Some guy says they went through a pond or something like that. And it's just Briar cricket here. It's rained so much he doesn't know that it's just a crick. But they grab water, they run it down their barrels every time. Yes, that's great, but they're running out of ammo. They're also running out of men. Between 12 and 2 o'clock, Gibson's brigade is just back and forth, fighting these briars and thorns to get to the fight, getting torn to pieces, but continuing to push forward. I mean, they even had blue wool broadcloth shell jackets in Gibson's brigade. I mean, let's just add something else to their problems. Because it's the militia color down in Louisiana before the war. They have bolts of it sitting around in Baton Rouge, and you have to give a soldier some kind of uniform to try to get them to act a little bit more soldierly-like, especially early on. And that's what they're doing with these guys. Well, they end up here in blue wool broadcloth shell jackets that look just like a Union shell jacket. Same material. Might have a different lining. I don't know that particular one, but either way, a lot of them are in blue. Now let's imagine this. Because Gibson's left flank, what's happening to them the whole time? Enfilade fire. So now they're cramming back in this dense thicket. Now you can't tell who's who and where's where. They overlap. Because of the blue, they accidentally fire into the backs of their own men. Even before, same regiment, earlier, a little bit earlier, there was a Lieutenant Bertner, that's his name, riding around with a captured Union flag. I believe a Union forage cap on his head.
Boy, ain't he right.
But anyway, I'll be nice. And he's shot by his own men, 4th Louisiana. And I don't know if it's true, but in a regimental history, one fellow says, all the guys that shot at Lieutenant Bertner ended up dying during the fight. I don't know if it's true or not, but he made mention of it, and that's how we know the story. Or at least that's one of the ways we know the story of Bertner. But either way, Gibson's brigade had it rough. They're getting shot by their own people. They're fighting through all this horrible firing. And that 4th charge, they had to fall back again. And that's it for Gibson too. The next charge, shortly after, the guys whose right flank stuck out really good. Shaver's brigade. Shaver's brigade doesn't have a lot of people, about 1,600, and these are all estimates. But give or take, about 1,600 people. We've already talked about numbers. We already know that's not going to work. The next charge, the conglomerate, the Anderson's brigade, and Louisiana Crescent Regiment. They charge forward about 1,500 men. Numbers. I don't even have to actually do the math. One's bigger than the other by a lot. Period. Now, a little bit after that is when you have the situation, as we know, Ruggles Line. Tour stop 4, just in case you want to get around and go see it. I'm not going to make you walk all the way over. But Ruggles Line. 53 artillery pieces. Now they start sending shells that direction. Now the Union infantrymen, they say those Confederate artillerymen were bad shots. They were shooting over our heads. This is hard for me to say. But of course they were men, infantrymen, because it's not always about you. That was really hard for me to say. But it's not. Because remember, those Parrott rifles, the 4 guns of Hickenlooper, the 4 guns of Munch, and all of that infantry. But it's those guns back there, those cannons, that's who they're aiming at. They're knocking down logs all over, large branches falling all over the infantry. That's what's getting them at that point. Now, that minute, at that minute, the flanks have given. I don't want to stop on anybody's program. Really wish I was getting a peach orchard. They're falling back. The Union troops are falling back. Hurlbut's division and the far flank as well. They're all falling back towards Pittsburgh Landing. The same thing with the other side of the battlefield. They start falling back. Now, the Confederates will start to utilize an old Napoleonic tactic, or some of them do, and they've been. What have they been trying to do all day? Those who have been following people like Bjorn today. What are they trying to turn?
The left flank.
That left flank, exactly. They're trying to turn the Union left. So over there, it makes sense that they're doing this, and that's what they do. So all those Confederates over there start swinging in. Now General Prentiss will swing back to refuse his left flank. Prentiss refuses the right. Wallace. But Wallace knows that he needs to get his men out of here. See, earlier in the morning, Grant rode up here with Hickenlooper's father, the other Hickenlooper, as his escort, because he was a 5th Ohio Cav. And Grant says to Prentiss and Wallace, hold this line at all hazards, at all costs. But Wallace knows this is that moment we've got to go. And Wallace starts getting his guys out of here. In doing so, he's shot right here below his left ear. The round comes out of his left eye socket. He's got a hole through his head and he hits the ground. I sat on the film set for a good 30 or 40 minutes because the guy who played Prentiss, he was really hamming up his role of being captured. He's a friend of mine. And I sat there as Wallace. It didn't matter if I looked like him or not. I had a receding hairline, so I guess they thought that was good enough. Either way, I had a hole through my head, face down, bloodied up. But I had to sit and wait for him to get done with his hamming it up in the film. I just sat there and I thought, because I know the fate of him. And I sat there with a hole through my head, right here and right here. Good thing I can wait my life. It was closed for a good long while. And I thought, and then I've reflected over the years since the filming about it. Because what happens with with Wallace, is he's left on the field overnight. Even his brother, Hitt, H-I-T-T, and some other fellas, they try to get him up, try to get him out of here. But the Confederates on the left, I swung in, and they come out of the tree line at that moment, and they have to let him go. And they get on back to the landing. Now also, his wife, Ann Wallace, Ann Dickey Wallace, her dad's on the battlefield too, Illinois Cavalry. T. Lyle Dickey, the Honorable T. Lyle Dickey. Someone comes back to her and says, Ann, you have a great deal of relatives on this battlefield. You cannot expect them all to come back safe. She knows what that means. Because William's not there. Her man. The guy, when they went on a vacation, she fell in some water, some cold water, Niagara Falls. She falls in the water. Without thinking, he jumps in and saves her and nurses her back to health. Anna's lost that man, she thinks. And he's on the battlefield, but he's alive. Now what he's going through, if he can hear at that moment, he's listening to the agony of that night. He's listening to the men screaming and yelling. Those Indiana boys over there, this is a dense thicket. Fires break out. Some of those guys burn alive. Now, he's not over there. He's actually further back that way. But all this is happening. Hogs are rooting around the dead and wounded bodies all night long. The rain, the thunder, the lightning, and Wallace is out in that. Somebody, thankfully, threw a blanket over him. But he's still out in those elements. Now, the other thing that happens, because he's now wounded, shot through the head. Anne has no clue he's still alive, but she starts tending to wounded troops on the transports at the landing. But Prentiss, he catches a lot of flack from certain people, some people, whatever. He followed orders. Hold this line at all costs, at all hazards. Wallace is on the ground with a hole through his head, so he's doing his orders. He followed his orders. Prentice gets captured with 2,250 of his and Wallace's men. General Prentice is captured with those men. General Prentice is captured with those men. General Wallace is on the ground with a hole through his head because he stayed with his men. Colonel Allen, that night, he refuses to be taken back to a surgeon because I'm not abandoning my men. His men take turns keeping watch over him all night long in a Union tent that is probably leaking with all the holes in it, but they take turns because that is their colonel. And they know what he did for them and the way he's fought for them and with them. Now, the next morning he's pale from the loss of blood, can't get up, too weak. Now he can't say no. They get him back to a surgeon. He ends up, his cheeks heal up. Right to it. His cheeks heal up. And what is probably hard for you to see in this image is that he is promoted to general. He even becomes the military governor of Louisiana during the war as well. 3 of the 4 regimental commanders in Gibson's brigade, including Gibson, become generals at some point in the war. Now, the argument I was telling you about that's in volume 10 of the official records, Bragg, Allen, other regimental commanders, and Colonel Gibson go back and forth. I encourage you to read it. It's probably on the internet, I'm sure. But read it. Now, Prentice is marched out of here by some Alabama boys and the rest of those men taken down to Corinth. They're all those who live. Not all of them do. Many die, or some die. But later they are all exchanged. Now Prentice's report in the official records is written, it's dated November, because he doesn't write it until afterwards. Now he's also got time to think, and he kind of controls the story. So that is probably one of the reasons that he catches some flack, because he does have time to make himself look even better than he might have been. Either way, it should be remembered he stayed with his men. He was captured with his men. He could have taken off on horseback and no one would have said a thing. He would have left it in charge of someone else and no one would have said anything. But he stayed. Now, the next morning, they get back to Wallace. They find him alive. They are blown away. And they're going to carry him back towards Pittsburgh Landing. And the story goes that he's carried there, and he hears Anne's voice. And he reaches out and looks up, and she says, "He knows me, he knows me." So dramatic, I love it. But he's carried up to the Cherry Mansion in Savannah, Tennessee. He's put in some guy's office. They put a curtain up or whatever, a sheet or something. And when you go into that office, he's in the back, and she's trying to nurse him back to health like he did her. And you had to walk in and be very quiet. All you did was put something down on the table or whatever to the officer, hand it to the officer. You're not talking loud in there. And you get the heck out, because General Wallace is in there, by God. Respect. Now, a few days later, General Wallace will die. But before he does, the story goes, more romance. He reaches out to Anne and he says, "We meet in heaven." And then General William Hervey Lamb Wallace dies because he stayed with his men. Now those guys survived, go on to be amazing fighters. I won't get into that stuff because that's somebody else's program in a whole other part. But, yeah, Wallace, Prentice, and Allen. And we have to give it up for those crazy infantrymen on both sides that go at each other like infantrymen do. And they go with that artillery like infantrymen do. Oh, crazy. Thanks for the compliment, they say, I'm sure. But they charge over and over and over now. Now, I don't want to keep us out here too long. It's hot, which is great, right? It could be freezing.
Yeah.
Like last year. Over there, Gibson's left flank. Remember, they're trying to stay inside. And then Gibson's right flank, about where those Indiana monuments are down the unsunken road. They give the hornet's nest its name. They talk about the rounds flying through the air, buzzing like angry hornets. It's Gibson's brigade that gives it its name. And remember, they're trying to stay inside this dense thicket. And then their right flank over there, inside the dense thicket. Not the open field, but their left to their right flank of Colonel Randall Lee Gibson's brigade. That is the hornet's nest.